Hey everybody. Um, Another week, another check-in. Hopefully by now you guys have your Arcana fairly squared away. You guys have any more questions or anything that has come up that you have thoughts about, feel free to ask. Now is a good time to take a moment and just get your character squared away before Clown comes out, which is the focus of this video. I wanted to talk a little bit about where we're at in terms of Lost Ark content and some of the things that you can reference to make sure that you are clown ready. Here is the notepad of the day, of the week, I suppose. But this is kind of my checklist, and this is basically what I've been preparing my character for when clown releases, and I've basically achieved most all of these things. So I consider myself kind of ready and comfortable and just kind of waiting for clown to come out. 1475, obviously your eye level at 1475 is key. Make sure your tripods are at least +3, so that means level 4 tripods, right? Level 4 is a second before maxing out. And then gems, mostly at level 7, if not all. I think these two things, the tripods and the gems, are very, very critical. Make sure you have these. Relic set, this should naturally come if you're doing either the normal or the hard modes. If you've been doing them in the last month or so, you should get them if you're doing normal or hard. It doesn't really matter. 5x3, which is probably the most challenging. It's the most intentional investment, both from a monetary standpoint as well as from like an effort standpoint. And then if you have excess, I personally recommend, and I'm probably going to do this as Clown comes out, I personally recommend you go to either 1485 or 1490 or above. Obviously, if your characters, I know some people who have been mostly focusing on one character have been able to get their characters at like 1505 plus. And so the higher, the more comfortable, but maybe there's a point for you where maybe you overgear too much and then maybe that devalues the quality of the content for you. That's kind of a subjective thing, so it's up to you. For me, I think 1485, 1490 is probably where I'm going to aim to land at for Clown. That's only if you have excess. So talking a little bit about the 5x3, if you haven't gotten there yet, it's definitely something that you want to start pushing for now, especially if you've already hit 1475. I think you should really focus your gold, so sell your honing materials and stuff like that. Make sure you can get to 5x3, because I don't know if this is the case on all the servers, but in North America West, the prices of these things are constantly going up. I think probably because of the Mokoko event, probably because more people are done preparing for Clown, and so they're just generating a lot more gold. They're pushing alts, something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but prices are going up. So you want to secure your 5x3 before they get even more expensive for you. If I were to guess, and again, I have no idea if this is actually going to happen or not, but I would guess it would take a while for these prices to come down. Probably only after Clown gets like really settled in will these prices come down. But 5x3 is really challenging because you need your ability stone, which can be very expensive depending on how many legendary engraving books you have read and what your luck is like. The Fion costs are through the roof, so that will be challenging. The legendary engraving books themselves are definitely an investment, and I recommend that you decide how many and which legendary engraving books you get before you roll your stones, because that can give you a lot of leniency for how many stones you roll. And then actually sourcing your relic accessories, obviously they're expensive, but it's also a lot of effort to set up the chart and make sure the correct engravings are on the accessories that you want, avoid the negative engravings, that kind of stuff. It can take a lot of time and try to keep costs down. If you guys have more questions about any of those things that I mentioned on the checklist, let me know. Maybe I can make a follow-up video on these, but most of these things I've gone over in previous videos of mine. And then finally, as it relates to Clown, I want to talk a little bit about some recommendations that I have as we're entering into Clown for people who are maybe feeling a little nervous about it or are unsure about how difficult it will be for them. And I made some things that I think that you should do. The most important being, I think you guys should read guides. Read guides for sure. Unless you really want to go for the blind progression experience, which is totally fine. It's a whole different beast if you're doing that, okay? I recommend you guys read guides. You don't need to try to remember everything. When I read a guide, prepping for a raid, I always try to skim the guide first, reread specific parts that interest me, right? It has nothing to do with whether this piece is like critical to the raid or not. I just skim it first, and then if there's anything interesting or I'm curious about, I reread it again. I don't really care to understand all aspects of the raid. I don't try to identify like what is the most important thing to know. I just kind of like see what's interesting for me. Maybe a day passes or a few days pass. Maybe watch a video of the raid and just kind of like think about the guide while you're watching the video. When you see something that you're not really sure about, go back and read the guide specifically about the parts that you're curious about. And I recommend that you kind of do this process. And I think that's a much better way to read guides than just trying to like remember everything in one go, just reading the guide and trying to like commit everything to knowledge. I think that's very tough. So if you guys want to see how I learn a raid, perhaps let me know. And when we get closer to Clown, I might record myself going through the process of trying to understand the raid and putting things together. But knowing how to read guides is important. The second thing that I would say is optimizing for party synergy is really, really nice, but I think one thing that is understated or cannot be understated is when you're making a static group or something like that, or if you have a group that you're going to be running Clown on, I would not sacrifice the tightness of the group for any kind of like numerical advantage. You're going to be failing a lot. Even if you're running an optimal party setup, you're going to be failing a ton. And if your group is prone to like exploding, or you're going to be putting expectations for people to be performing better than they are, and there's going to be a lot of infighting, it's going to be hard for you to want to run Clown. And it's going to be hard to be okay with the amount of failures that are inevitably going to happen. I think probably the best environment is to have a group where everybody is excited about succeeding, and then they're also okay with kind of putting the reps in and failing a lot. Good expectations, a good group, and then party synergy is kind of secondary to that. And then the last thing I think is always true in all aspects of Lost Ark. Before you squeeze your damage in, I recommend that you learn the pace of the boss. When does it attack? How long does its attack last? How long before the next attack? These things are really, really, really important. Learn the patterns of the boss fight. You know, when does the boss do this thing versus that thing? Are there any like this move leads to that move? You know, when do the mechanics happen? This is very important. And then learning all the tells for the move. I really think that when you play Lost Ark, you should try to never attack the boss randomly. Almost at every point in time in Lost Ark, when you're familiar with a boss fight, whenever you choose to attack the boss, you know exactly how long you're going to attack and that you're absolutely safe, or you know that you can spacebar on reaction depending on what the boss does. Obviously, when you're learning a boss fight, you're kind of just like going in randomly, but that's all the more reason why you should make a focused effort on understanding the tells and the movesets of the boss rather than just randomly throwing damage in. I think too much this happens so much in different raids and even in Guardian raids that I see, where people just, their default is attacking and they just constantly get hit by everything. And what ends up happening if you play this way is that you basically only learn enough lessons to the point where I'm just always attacking, and I get hit by this. When I'm learning the fight, I get hit by enough that I kind of like die, right? And then I can't attack anymore. And then what you do is you like increase the level of scrutiny that you have for the boss fight until it's enough that you kind of numbers game and beat the boss fight as opposed to actually learning the moveset. And you kind of rely on your potions, your support, or whatever, and you just trade blows with the boss kind of barbarically until you beat it. If you guys need any examples of this, think of either your own performance or other people's performance in things like Gate 1 of Vaulton. I think barely anybody actually learns the moveset of the wolves. They're just trying to muscle their way through it. A lot of the gates in Vicus, I guess like Gate 1, Gate 2 maybe in Vicus can be this way a lot of the times. Many of the Guardian raids, how many times are you just staying there just randomly getting hit by boss attacks because you're just caught just blindly attacking into a boss, you know? So I would recommend that when you learn a fight, you first try to understand the boss's pacing, the patterns, and the tells. And that's what I would say about Clown. There's not really much to say. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where we're at in Lost Ark content right now. We're obviously in a lull. There was a whole bunch of stuff that came in the last few months. When Vicus released, we got the Arcana class release. With that, there were a bunch of patches for quality of life changes, right? 1370 honing buff that allowed a lot of people who were kind of accumulating materials on their alts to kind of surge forward. A bunch more people got alts to 1415 at least, and so kind of, you know, a lot of people are playing Vicus and Vulcan. Oh shoot, I don't have pheromone. And so I think we're at a point where we, at least for me, I'm kind of at a lull, you know. Now I technically have 7 alts that I was doing dailies on, but now that I'm not spending my gold on anything specifically, I'm not getting gems or tripods, I'm not honing, I'm just kind of like saving gold, and I also don't need to be like generating gold as much. I'm gonna try Awakening first and see how this damage plays out. I'm gonna get hit by this. So I'm not actively farming gold anymore, and so I've kind of relaxed the amount of alts that I'm playing. I've basically just been doing dailies on 3 characters, and I haven't done a lot of weeklies, to be honest, in the last week. I have a lot of rest built up, and I think that's fine. You know, we're at a point in time with the game where there's not a lot that we need to be doing, and I think it's a good break. Oftentimes, it can feel like you need to continuously push until you're kind of like, you know, constantly pushing an alt, and if you're not pushing an alt, then you're pushing your main. If you're not pushing your main, then you're doing some kind of horizontal content. But to be honest, I think it's okay to just be like done with what the game has to offer right now, and then just come back when Clown comes out. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I think it's part of the reason why today's video also isn't specifically about like a portion of the game, and not as like relevant as like a specific guide for how to play Arcana or something like that, because I think it's just time to chill right now. But with that, I still think it's very fun to beat up on Turtle. Got the raid in. Nice. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have a pheromone. Sorry. I needed to buy more pheromones, but I think it's like, it's a perfect time right now between Vicus and Clown to just kind of take a breather. I have been playing Lost Ark almost daily since the game released. I have a lot of hours into this game. And I think that was great. But now that I'm done with a lot of the rush of progression, I kind of am fine with taking a break, playing a few different games. You can roll your cards on these things, by the way, if you didn't know. So while you have nothing to do and you're blocked out by these barriers, it's always good to roll cards. Okay. I don't have great cards right now. Maybe I get Judgment or something like that, but this works. Counter M. Right in. Nice. And for me, like, I think I've tried a lot of different characters in the game, trying to find a class that I felt like was more homey for me. And I think so far, out of the characters that I've played, Deathblade, Arcana, and Sulfus are the ones that stick out to me the most right now. But it's been kind of hard, to be honest, for me to find a main. Characters that I want to try out weren't available on release, which I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with. Let's get one more card draw before we go into Frost. For example, the Reaper hasn't come out yet, but that's a class that I kind of really want to try. And because it wasn't there on release, there's always this feeling in the back of my head about like, okay, well, this class is fun enough, but what if Reaper is even more fun, you know? And for that reason, I'm also considering even right now, like stocking up materials and resources right now, you know? not spending as aggressively and trying to see if I can stockpile enough for when Reaper comes out. He's gonna double jump. I have enough materials to boost it and get a good look at what that class is like in the end game. As you all should know by now, in Lost Ark, classes can feel very different for when they're at 1445 with their relic sets versus at 1370 or even 1415. God, so slow. Teammates. This. Use our card here. That. Back away from jump. Balance. Oh, I have my awakening up again. That's cool. That. Okay, cool. So basically, the recommendation is just hang out. That's all I wanted to say in this video. Thanks as always for watching. Just like Lost Ark content, the video this week is going to be a lull. Oh, nice. I boop damage. Nice. Good job, us. Good job. Thanks, you guys, so much for always watching and giving me such great comments. A lot of you guys have mentioned how helpful the guides were. That makes me really happy. Obviously, for my content, I kind of want to be a little less... I do like to do guides, but I kind of want to be a little more general with the content that I do. Kind of talking about the game. So hopefully that'll pick off. But I will see you guys next week. And when it comes closer to Clown, maybe there's a lot more to talk about. Okay, peace.